That's a funny riff.
Classic shit. This is like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, yeah.
Even now, it's the coolest thing ever.
We've all heard that riff. No one needs to hear that riff right now.
Of all the Iron Maiden songs, you know, you have your Run to the Hills and you have your Number of the Beasts, which are just like your, oh, you know, the first time you hear them. But the one that sticks with me the most, hands down, The Trooper. That intro riff is just so fucking sick. It's almost like you're in the fucking horse's mind and the horse is just like, let me gallop, let me fucking gallop. There's so much tension and rising action happening in that very simple, small lick.
Loved Iron Maiden, so like The Trooper. Love those guys, Flight of Icarus. Big influence on me.
And one very defining thing as a musician, as a bass player for me, was the gig Live After Death from Iron Maiden. Every day after school, I got home and I played this gig every day just to learn to do the Steve Harris galloping and to get some stamina to my right hand. Yeah, because originally I played with a pick because my brother is a guitar player. He played with a pick. But this was really something that made me think, like, yeah, I really wanted to be able to do that. And yeah, so I practice a lot with Iron Maiden stuff. So the classic Trooper, for example. What's also interesting about him, he was using power chords. Well, let's take the Trooper again, like especially on live, you can see he does it. This kind of stuff. And I was like, whoa! That way you like, give kind of boost, especially if you on live situation when the like in Iron Maiden, both guitar players are doing melodies because they always have this harmony thing going on. So this bass comes in and makes it more bigger.
Like I said before, I was playing a lot of Iron Maiden when I started learning to play. And like obviously stuff like The Trooper.
And it really changed the first time I heard Iron Maiden.
Yeah, same.
That was kind of when it changed. I think, yeah. For both of us.
Dude, I came home from school one day, and I don't know if you remember Much More Music.
Oh, yeah.
It was on TV, and they were playing Iron Maiden's Rock in Rio, 2001. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that was the first time I'd seen Iron Maiden, heard Iron Maiden, and it completely changed.
And it was like new at the time, like that had come back, and that was like their reunion thing.
Yeah.
But it was that was a life-changing concert, you know, like and we used to play those songs like in one of our first bands.
In high school, we always used to pass notes to each other because Van Halen was such a big deal when I was a kid that we would all try to figure out Eruption or Spanish Fly or whatever, you know, all those tapping licks and all the, you know, all that sort of Van Halen stuff was a big part of it.
Guy picks up a guitar in the music store and they just go right to Eruption.
But there's also so many great other, you know, guitar riffs on there, like. You know, so many great ones. just like it's endless. Every song on that record, to me, is just.
So when I first heard Van Halen, it was actually when I saw Van Halen. I saw Eddie Van Halen play. I looked up and I said, "Man, that's what I want to do with my life." Riffs like.
There was always the Eddie Van Halen. There was like this thing that those songs affected me in a tremendous way. So there were so many incredible songs growing up. I love that I grew up in that shred era.
The first song that made me want to pick up a guitar had to be Van Halen. Like, it was just overall, the band Van Halen made me want to pick up a guitar, and Eddie Van Halen. And the Van Halen riff that's the most like iconic to me, I guess, is
I kind of my favorite period was the '80s. I'm sorry, I love the '80s, and see this guy here. Right? So I was dieting on Van Halen, and I loved Kiss. So let's see if I can whip this up. It's still a little early for me. That's all I got.
I mean, one riff that just out of nowhere is one of the most economical riffs I've ever heard, and so fun because I can really hear James laughing when he came up with it. Is the like that's funny. That's funny. That's a funny riff. James Hetfield is definitely one of the best guitar players that has ever walked this earth. Even though I know sort of theoretically how to play Master of Puppets, it's impossible to play downstrokes the way that he does from start to finish for 7 minutes. Truly mind-blowing.
So like around that moment of time, what's the riff in particular that kind of when you hear it, you go right back to that moment when you're jamming with some of your friends for the first time?
Probably Master of Puppets.
Yeah.
Just the main riff, I remember just playing that and thinking it was like the best thing ever. And learning to use my little finger and stuff, because it's like stepping up and that, and it was just a sick song to learn and jam.
The first riff or a song that we tried to adapt to metal a cappella style, or where I tried, was actually Master of Puppets. Master of Puppets was the first riff where I really tried to imitate that guitar sound with my voices, like. So we took these downstrokes here, single note with a power chord combination, and then try to sing it like and so on.
Obviously, like a lot of other people, when I started playing, and still are to this day, Metallica was my all-time favorite band. So I bought the Master of Puppets tab book, and I think that was the first album that I learned from front to back, like with leads and rhythms and everything like that. And the first album I learned that I felt really accomplished when I learned all the riffs from it. So I think Master of Puppets, every time I think of just the song in general, it is the one that reminds me of when I first started playing guitar. So I would have to go with the main riff to that, the intro riff to Master of Puppets, which is goes a little bit something like this.
Master of Puppets.
loved to play growing up, and apart from all the old Iron Maiden stuff, was of course classic stuff like Master of Puppets.
This one little tricky technique that I finally saw somebody play right in front of me and made me make it sound like the way Tony Iommi was playing it, this little sort of hammer-on thing. So it was Black Sabbath, Paranoid.
You know, years ago, I used to play Paranoid in one of my little cover bands I had back in Minnesota. And then, of course, Megadeth, we covered Paranoid. And as we were trying to figure out which song to play for that Nativity of Black record, I initially suggested, hey, let's do Paranoid, just because I knew it, and it was, you know, a pretty simple song as far as the arrangement. It's a little avant-garde, the arrangement, actually, for such a simple song. But we went around basically the entire catalog, and we tried all these different Sabbath songs, and eventually ended up back on Paranoid. And of course, I played with a pick, so... I'm sort of emulating Geezer's sound. It's the Megadeth version, the David Ellison version of a Geezer line.
Or it could have been Paranoid by the Dickies, not Black Sabbath.
You know, I was listening to all kinds of stuff. For me, it was really easy to pick up on Black Sabbath, because of course I loved it because it was so heavy, but so easy to play to as well. Like you didn't have to have amazing technique to be able to play something like Paranoid, you know? Like just... You know, those kind of things.
Black Sabbath, Paranoid.
And that's when I started expanding from punk rock. He was one of the few bass players that played with, did the gallop of four fingers.
By the way, I mean, almost every early Sabbath riff, you know. Now, I gotta say, I knew that Tony Iommi had plastic fingers because he cut the tips of his fingers off. Kids, you know this shit? You know how he did it? Cutting a bagel. It's the most common way. Be careful. Get a bagel cutter, kids. You know, you should know better. You know, don't try to cut a bagel with a knife. You'll cut your goddamn fingers right off. You'll end up like Tony Iommi, which is probably a good thing. Very successful career. Remember that video for Paranoid? Huh? I noticed Tony Iommi, he was playing it at the 12th fret. Still sounded great, right? He might have just been with us because he was like, this is a video, I can do whatever the I want. Just playing the tracks and shit.
So the first two riffs I ever actually learned on guitar, I think it's a toss-up between Black Sabbath Paranoid and Metallica Seek and Destroy.
I was really hooked on rock at that point, and asked my parents for a guitar. And the first riff I got to learn was from my first teacher. I went in the first week and he taught me how to play the verse riff for Paranoid, Black Sabbath.
You know, you're a kid, so you're going... figured that out on this, you know, this nylon string acoustic guitar, and I was all excited, and I showed my dad, and
you know, and that was cool and everything. But, you know, the riff is actually... But I was in the neighborhood.
I do remember certain riffs inspiring me a lot. Like the first time I ever heard Smoke on the Water, you know, I was a kid. My cousins put on the vinyl, okay, the vinyl. A lot of people have never seen vinyl in this day and age. Put a piece of vinyl on a goddamn record player and put that needle down and turn that motherfucking thing up to 10. And I heard this. It was way cooler sounding though, because I'm playing through an amp the size of I don't even know what that, it looks like an iPhone. It's a Fender Champ or some shit. Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water, classic shit.
I mean, there's tons of them, but I think the simplest ones, the old school ones that just stick in your head right off the bat, like there's nothing better than that Smoke on the Water riff. I think everybody knows it right off the bat. Get, you know, some killer riffs like the rock and roll riff from Zeppelin is killer, but that's a little more, you don't just pick up a guitar and play it.
Right.
You can pick up a guitar and, you know, do the you know.
Yeah.
You learn it in 2 seconds. I think the Smoke on the Water and the Iron Man riffs are the two most iconic, most learned riffs of all time. Yeah, but they're simple stuff, power chords, but you never forget them once you hear them.
This is a 1954 Fender lap steel. And in case you don't know what this is, it's a wonderfully soulful and expressive instrument. Michael Basquette, my producer and dear friend, said, "Hey man, for some of these songs, what do you think about trying a lap steel?" And I was like, well, I love the lap steel, and I'm a big fan of a lot of guys who've used them along the way. Sure, I'll give it a shot. I've never played it, but it should be interesting. So I just kind of took to it. I'm going to now take this and rock it out a little bit. I don't talk about this a lot because I always forget about it, but the very first heavy riff I ever learned, and at this point I don't know how heavy it is compared to what y'all probably grew up listening to, but for me, a band like Deep Purple was one of the, they're one of the architects.
I hate to say it, Smoke on the Water. Of course, that was the first riff I really got into, and I was like, oh my God, this is heavy and all this kind of shit. You got to realize I'm almost 55 years old, so I'm from a way back older school. I mean, anything by Kiss, off of Kiss Alive 1 is really what inspired me as well. My first self-taught things I've always played by ear were probably Smoke on the Water or something, which everybody plays it differently. I actually first picked it out on my acoustic on the E string. So then once my ear got better and I figured out it was,
I think the first riff I properly learned to play though was like the classic first riff, which was Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple, and again I think I sort of figured it out on one string, like I've got it. I figured it out. That's what it is. And then you realise that it's actually. It doesn't sound the same without the bass line. It doesn't sound the same without the bass line. It doesn't sound the same without the hi-hats.
Why do you think that's the first riff everybody learns?
I think because it's the easiest. I mean, I guess when you first learn it, you're just doing. Yeah, so.
First riff I learned to play probably was it's either Wild Thing or Smoke on the Water. Do you want me to play it? Okay. Here we go. Better not f it up.
Sweet vibrato, brah.
Yeah.
I think if every electric guitarist is honest, it's either Smoke on the Water or Wild Thing. Isn't it?
Yeah.
First riffs. I was when I was a kid, back in the 80s. It was, of course, Smoke on the Water. First.
Yeah, the first riff I ever learned was definitely Smoke on the Water. I can remember that. It was on my sister's like 3/4 scale acoustic guitar.
I first started playing guitar when I was 12, and the first song I learned was Smoke on the Water, which I am not going to bore you by playing that song. We've all heard that riff. No one needs to hear that riff right now.